Hey guys, welcome back for my latest video. So this one's going to be on a completely different topic to anything that I've done before. It's going to be a little bit different. We'll see how it goes. First time I'm going to be talking about a scientific topic. So today I'm talking about nuclear fusion. So you might be wondering, well, what the hell is nuclear fusion and why should you care? So nuclear fusion, very briefly, is it's a nuclear reaction, I guess you could call it, but it's a means by which you would generate electricity. So today, if you go to a power plant, you'd be generating electricity from, coal, gas, hydroelectric, nuclear fission. We'll get to that. Wind, solar, or what have you, and then that powers the lights, that powers your television, that powers your, whatever you plug into a power socket in the wall. And the thing that I really want to talk about is, and this should be in the back of your mind throughout the entirety of this video, is that energy is the lifeblood of an economy. So what that means is that everything really requires energy, not just your lights, not just your microwave or your phone, but also your cars and your buses and your trains and your planes and your tractors and your everything requires energy to run. Now, what source that energy takes will be dependent on what it is that you're trying to do. If you're trying to get from A to B in your car, then you're going to fill up your car with some, in the UK we'd call it petrol, in the UK you'd call it, in the US, you'd call it gas. And we're moving over to electric vehicles slowly, but there's a power plant on the back end that is running on something else completely, that generates that power, which then goes into your EV. So what is nuclear fusion? As I mentioned, it's a means by which you can produce a lot of energy. Now, nuclear fusion is what's used to power the sun and all the stars. So, if you're ever out on a sunny day, that's energy from nuclear fusion. Keep in mind that the sun is like 8 million miles away. So it's producing a lot of energy, and it's going to be doing that for billions of years to come. So the goal of nuclear fusion power, which we don't have just yet, is to put the sun in a box and to produce huge amounts of energy, and then to use that to power our cities, and then of course you could use it to power your planes, your cars, your trains, and anything else that requires energy to move or to run. Now, when I say the word nuclear, some of you might get a little bit worried about that. I mean, the nuclear power that we use today is called nuclear fission, which very simply, you take an atom, you split the atom, and that produces a lot of energy. But with fusion, you're kind of doing the opposite. What you're doing is you're superheating hydrogen, and you're heating it so much that the hydrogen atoms end up fusing together rather than breaking apart. And just to give you an idea of what it takes to do that, so the temperature at the center of the sun is 15 million degrees Celsius. Nuclear fusion reactions need to get to about 10 times that, so 10 times the temperature at the center of the sun to create what's called a plasma, which we hope can be self-sustaining. So there are a few different projects around the world to create a nuclear fusion reactor. There's ones in Korea, in the US, in the UK, a couple of other countries as well. There's a really big project in the south of France called ITER, which I think has multiple different countries as parties to that project, including the European Union, the US, Russia, China, India, I think Japan and Korea as well. So, what's the issue with nuclear fusion? Why is it that we don't have it today? Well, nuclear fusion, I think the research into it first began in the 1950s, and the issue is that back then they thought it was 50 years away, and then it got to the 70s and it was still 50 years away, and then it got to the 90s and it's still 50 years away. And we're kind of I think that the timelines are kind of shortening a bit, and you've got less people saying it's 50 years away, but it seems to be, that the joke about nuclear fusion is that it's the energy source of the future, and it always will be. And a lot of people think that we should be focusing on developing things like wind and solar and all of those, which can generate electricity sort of immediately and don't require a 30-year nuclear experiment to begin working. So why does all of this matter? Why would we even want a nuclear fusion reactor? Well, a few reasons. So the sun and the stars produce huge amounts of energy. So what you want with an energy, a power plant, is something that produces lots of energy, but which is also clean and isn't going to contribute to climate change, and nuclear fusion would be able to do that. It would produce so much energy that it would be a replacement for things like wind and solar. You wouldn't even really need those anymore, because the fusion reactor would be producing so much power, and it could power potentially multiple cities at the same time. And so you think about science fiction nerd, if you think about something like Battlestar Galactica or Star Trek or Star Wars, any of those, you have these huge ships with thousands of people on them. Take a Star Destroyer from Star Wars, thousands of people on board, and they also have light speed travel, but we'll skip over that part. But what you need to power these kinds of ships is huge amounts of energy, and at the moment, I guess you could use something like a regular nuclear fission reactor, which is what we find in nuclear power plants today, but fusion would really unlock the amount of energy that would be required to do a whole bunch of things, and not just huge starships, but potentially even cities on the moon or Mars or Titan or any other planet or moon that we want to build on. On top of that, it would also mean that if we had the sun in a box, a nuclear fusion reactor producing lots of energy, it would also mean that energy would become just dirt cheap. At least in Europe here, all of our energy costs have gone up, and so it would be very nice if energy costs were, say, a tenth of what they are right now. And the potential for something like nuclear fusion is even bigger than that. I think it also has the ability to potentially eliminate poverty or hunger. Once you eliminate the energy side of the equation of producing any good, really, you would imagine that things would become incredibly cheap. So you think about something like, say, what it takes to farm a field of food. So a few hundred years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, you would have had peasants farming that land, tilling the soil, harvesting the crops, and maybe you have a few cattle to do that, and then you go and you harvest the crops yourself, and essentially you're running off whatever you're eating, and then what happened is we had the Industrial Revolution, and now we have tractors and we have combine harvesters which are running on diesel. So that concentration of energy that you could put in those allows you to do much more than, say, some cattle would. But nuclear fusion would essentially mean that you can produce goods very cheaply, and you could run them as well incredibly cheaply without too much cost, and the amount of energy that would be produced would be so much larger than what we're able to get out of power plants today. So I hope that we'll see a working nuclear power plant in my lifetime. Helion, a company which was mentioned by Sam Altman, OpenAI's CEO, on Lex Fridman's podcast, mentioned a company by the name of Helion. He didn't mention that he's invested in Helion himself, but Helion has a purchase order with Microsoft to produce electricity by nuclear fusion in 2028, which is 4 years away. So, if we get to see nuclear fusion this decade, I'll be pleased enough with that. if I see it within my lifetime, I think that will be quite an achievement for humanity. So I guess we'll have an update video in a few years' time to see where that project with Helion is, and Microsoft, and if they're going to be able to power Microsoft's data centers with their 50 megawatt nuclear fusion reactor. So hope you liked the video, guys, and we'll probably update in a few years' time. We'll see where we're at with fusion startups and fusion research, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you at my next video.